You know that nagging headache? The one that just won't quit and it sends your mind racing to the absolute worst case scenario? It's a really common fear, and today we're going to tackle it head on with some clear, simple information. Let's dive in and separate the facts from the fear.
So, this is the big question, isn't it? It's the one that probably has you searching online late at night. You've got this constant, maybe pretty severe headache, and your first thought is the scariest one. Look, that's a totally valid concern, so let's get you some clarity.
Okay, so before we even get to the symptoms, let's start with the absolute basics. What exactly is a brain tumor, anyway? At its very core, it's actually this simple. A brain tumor is just an abnormal bunch of cells that grow where they shouldn't, creating an extra mass inside the brain. But that simple definition leads to the next and probably most important question. And this right here is a crucial point. The word tumor makes our brain immediately jump to cancer, but that's not always the case. A tumor can be malignant, which, yes, is cancerous, but it can also be benign, which means it's non-cancerous. So the number one thing to get straight is that having a brain tumor does not automatically mean you have brain cancer. All right, now that we know what a tumor is and what it isn't, let's talk about the part you're probably most curious about, the common symptoms. But listen, before we list a single thing, I really need to stress this point. There is no universal checklist here. The symptoms are completely different for every single person. It all depends on the tumor size, where it is, and what type it is. So please keep that in mind as we go through some of the possibilities. Okay, so here are some of the potential signs. And yeah, persistent, severe headaches are on the list, and they're often worse in the morning. But look at the other things here. Feeling dizzy or having problems with your balance, unexplained nausea or vomiting, vision getting blurry or seeing double, maybe weakness or numbness in your arms or legs. And a big one is having a seizure for the very first time as an adult. Even sudden changes in memory or just how you act can be a sign. And we have to come right back to this because it's so important. Let this one really sink in. Just because a headache is a possible symptom, it does not mean your headache is a brain tumor. Honestly, this is the single most important thing to take away from this section. A headache by itself is very rarely the only sign. So if symptoms aren't enough to go on, how do doctors actually figure this out? Well, that brings us to the diagnosis, the actual path from being worried to getting a clear answer. You know, the process is actually pretty straightforward. Usually starts with a visit to a specialist, a neurologist, who will give you a full checkup. If they have any concerns, they'll order the most important test, an MRI of the brain. The MRI is really the gold standard here. It gives doctors a super detailed picture of what's going on inside, which lets them give you a confirmed, definite answer. Which, of course, brings us all the way back to the ultimate question, the one we started this whole thing with. After hearing all this, you're still sitting there wondering about yourself. And here is the only real answer. Nobody, and I mean nobody, can tell you if you have a brain tumor based on a list of symptoms you found online. The only way to know for sure is from a doctor based on an MRI report. Trying to diagnose yourself just leads to more anxiety. Getting a real diagnosis from a doctor leads to a real plan. And it is so crucial to remember that headaches are incredibly common and usually have much, much simpler explanations. Things we deal with every day, like stress or high blood pressure, sinus problems, or even issues with your neck. These are way more likely to be the cause. The odds are overwhelmingly in favor of it being one of these things. So, we've covered a lot of ground, from what a tumor is to how it's diagnosed. But if you remember only one single thing from this entire explainer, please let it be what's coming up next. This is it. Just don't panic, take a breath. The whole point of getting information like this isn't to create more fear. It's to replace that fear with knowledge and a clear idea of what to do next. Panicking doesn't help anyone. Taking calm, informed steps does.
So what does that clear path look like? Here it is. This is your action plan. First, if your symptoms are sticking around or getting worse, don't just brush them off. The right move is to see a doctor and get a real checkup. And if you've already had an MRI, your next step is to sit down with your specialist and have them walk you through that report so you understand it completely.
And that's what this is all about in the end. Fear loves uncertainty. But when you have the right information, you're empowered. You're not just guessing or worrying anymore. You're ready to make the right decisions for your health. So the question isn't just what if. The real question is, what's my next